Mr. Smith.
I was about to say, Mr. Innes, before we were interrupted for the commercials, that politicians in the Bahamas today must recognize, probably above all people, as engineers must look at their profession. Politicians today must look at themselves and their group and determine whether they are serving the Bahamian people to the satisfaction of the people. And I don't just mean spending money to do things that the economy may not be able to afford at this time. Are we in the political directorate, are we pushing for the public service to examine themselves and find out how are they serving the needs of the Bahamian people? And if the Bahamian people are dissatisfied with the services that their tax dollar pays for, and not just to glorify individuals, because I've heard people talk about how difficult it is to get in touch with their MP, get in touch with ministers, and then older people will reflect on how easy it was. I remember a little story about a 14-year-old young man who wanted to discuss something with the Prime Minister. He called the Prime Minister's office. Mrs. Smith, Sir Lyndon Pendleton's very competent secretary, said, okay, come next Tuesday at 4 o'clock, or next Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And he showed up, and the young fellow said, well, why you told me to come here at 4 o'clock? She said, well, I knew you'll be in school until 3 o'clock, and you wanted to come. And the young fellow got in to see the Prime Minister of the country to discuss something that concerned him. Now, maybe he was emboldened to do that because he was the son of a very distinguished lady who was somebody known to the Prime Minister. But he did get to talk to him. And today, what do we hear? I can't get him on the phone. I can't get people on the phone. I can't get in touch with my MP. And when people come back, they just fob me off to change the cell number. And they were so eager to see me doing the campaign. Well, they have, and I listen not often to some of the debates in the House. And knowing the individuals that is speaking, I'm saying, well, I wonder who wrote that speech for them. Because very little is said on your feet, off the cuff, which is what parliamentary debate is supposed to be about. But above that, I want to say that what concerns me very greatly is not what younger people say of older people and try to suggest their time is finished and they must fade into the proverbial sunset, but how they are used. How they are used by some of the very people who didn't quite make it to the level that they wanted to make it in politics, would use young people to try to give it to someone else who probably, if that someone else was still in the political arena, the young fellow would have been told, hey, look, I understand your ambition, and I want you to have it, but you have to prepare yourself. Because being young is not a qualification. It just simply promises that when you get there, you'll be able to serve for a longer period. I served for almost 30 years in the House. And when I left Parliament, I was still a reasonably active individual.
Yeah.
Because I was prepared to enter Parliament and to perform in a way that I last a period of time. Now, there are many people who get to that stage of getting to Parliament when they're somewhat older. But it is they, in many cases, who want to encourage young people to try to get rid of this older person because they fail to meet the benchmark earlier. But the young people, as is the case with women, being a woman alone doesn't qualify you. But being a talented woman who understands the issues that concern women and concern the societies, being women who understand the heartache of the woman on the street whose son is incarcerated in Fox Hill does qualify you. But you can't go there and take advantage of that lady by simply mouthing platitudes about her son who may be incarcerated. You got to give that lady on Kemp Road or over the hill in Mountel Heights or wherever they live in the Family Islands, let them know that I genuinely concern about your wayward son or your misguided daughter who is only 25 and already got 3 children. And she don't have the foggiest idea where the father of those 3 children are. You shouldn't take advantage of her circumstances, but you should come to them with solutions. We're going to find places where she could get a job. We're going to ask her to spend some time to train herself a little more so she can get a better job. We're going to search down the father of those children and say, boy, live up to your obligation. You've got 3 children out there, and you got to take care of them. And then we got to find a way of demanding prison reform and a training system so some of those young people could come out of prison with some skills. And then we got to nurture them in a way that their attitude could change, their resolutions to problems isn't violence. But today, too many of them believe. That is why the level of crime in the Bahamas is such that those young people, those young men, mostly young men, believe the solution to a problem is a criminal act. We have got to find a way in this society, and the leadership for that should come primarily from the politicians, but the politicians got to be of a mind to do it. And then it has to come with us encouraging involvement of whatever family those young people have. And we've got to find a way of convincing some of those very sympathetic mothers that your child has, your son or your daughter is inclined to be this, but you don't have to be supportive of it, of what they're doing, because what you're doing is not reflective of genuine love. And we also have to engage the faith leadership in this country, among the Christians, among the Rastafarians, among the Jews, among the Baha'i people, whatever body of faith it is, and not just by talking to and down to those unfortunate, misguided young people. We got to find solutions to the problems. And above all, we got to find solutions to lifting people out of poverty. Because if the children are living in circumstances that the very poor live in, what prospect for a better life would they have? And you know, every time we drive the streets and we see some unfortunate individual on the side of the road, please take a moment, pause, and find out if there's a little something you could do to help that person probably feel a little dignity so they would want to get out of that circumstances that they're in. And if you do that, you know, you'll be responding to that charge in Matthew 25. I was hungry and you fed me. All of us know it. I was naked and you clothed me. And then the sinner said, this person says, when did we do this? They said, well, such as you do to the least of these, you do unto me. We hear the preachers preach that all the time in church. All the time, and then we leave church and we'll pass a needy person on the street and forgot what we just heard. But, Stenius, there are no problems in this country that we can't solve. We got talented Bahamians, and we've got to encourage them to get involved in helping to solve the problems of the society. We got to get them involved in helping them to demand results from their political leaders, their spiritual leaders, the leaders of civic society, these service clubs that in a couple of cases, some of them are very good, but in some cases, those who are involved in some of the organizations forget that the word that they're supposed to be in a service club, but they give very little service.
Mr. Smith, I can remember clearly the role the Independent Secretariat was playing in educating the then colony of the Bahamas on what independence meant. I can remember the green paper on independence. And I can remember being a part of the committee that went around the different schools explaining aspects of the green paper. Is that educational component to revisit where we are, is that going to be a part of this 50th anniversary?
I would hope so. And I would hope to be focused on the need to do that. And the need to go around the country and encourage people to clean up the country. The proliferation of abandoned vehicles across the entire Bahamas, the proliferation of these signage all over the place that sometimes blocks the motorist's view coming around some of the roundabout. The fact that there's 20-something billboards outside of the Red Cross place, none of them have anything to do, most of them don't have anything to do with what the Red Cross is about. Signage on little little benches for people to sit on to wait for a bus, telling you to drink a beer. On a wall of my former Cathedral Church of St. Francis, there is a thing directing you to where you can go around the corner where there's a liquor producing company. It's on the wall as you pass Grey Cliff, past my good friend Tony McKinney's chamber, my dear departed brother, Michael Turner's chamber. You drive to when you get to the corner, you go down to Bay Street, or you turn that way to get to Meakin Street.
Yeah.
There's a sign telling you where to go to a liquor producing company on the wall of the church. Now, I hope somebody connected with St. Francis would tell them, please take that down, man. And then you're driving along and you see that they're promoting a beer with a chair, they raise the beer bottle to celebrate and suggesting it got no alcohol in it. I mean, and then you look at the number of abandoned buildings in this country. I drove on I drive on Wolf Road from time to time. There's Bodie Building. There's the old House of Labor. There's the other place. There's another place and another. And I said, you know, and on my island, Exuma, every time I go up there, I used to remember Georgetown was a picturesque, ideal family island community where you could swim in the water that Georgetown is built around called Lake Victoria, named after the then Queen. Well, if I wouldn't want somebody named that pond after me today. But you look around there, and sometimes the only time you think it's picturesque on certain areas surrounding it is when the grass is high, because when they cut the grass down, you notice the proliferation of garbage. We are better than that. And we got to stop relying on the government to clean it up. If you go to Fort Charlotte and you drive the hill up to where one of the fort places is, and you come out of Marcus Bettel thing, there's a big bus sitting right to your left. It's a big, big bus. And that has been there. And across the street, there are a couple of abandoned cars. And we pass there daily, but they're still there. And don't talk about the potholes, man. And I do not believe for a moment that if we had local government, which we should have had a long time, Bernard Nottage and I, when the then F&M government introduced the Local Government Act, Bernard Nottage and I and others on our side, PLP on our side in those days, we were in opposition after 92. We talk about, how could you talk about local government and exclude New Providence? 3/4 of your population live here.
Yeah.
And years and years, and the formula is in there, you know. I wrote a paper on it. Warren Lavarity in '67 alluded to it. New Providence Voice, you know. The Grand Bahama Port Authority and one of their amendments in 1960 foreshadowed real local government in Grand Bahama. I wrote a paper on it, and others have done so. I don't suggest mine is ideal, but that was my perception. And we're talking about it again. But we're talking about it again without including New Providence. And these little potholes are all over the place. Mm-hmm. The Ministry of Works is intended to deal with big things. Little things like fixing a temporary solution. Every time on a Sunday, I drive past Compass Point, and there's a particular hole, I duck it on my way down to St. Paul's Church. On the way back, I inevitably forget that it's there, and boom. And there's one by British Colonial. These are things that local communities could deal with. I'm surprised that whoever owns the business sector of the Hilton Hotel isn't just concerned about fixing that, because it must be a source of annoyance for so many people. Anyway, there are things that the society must realize that each community wants to see happen this year and next year. But we have to do sufficient in terms of pointing out the direction we want to go in our 50th year, that by the time we get to our 100th year, the people will say, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. But if we do the same little bits of celebration we did last year and the year before that and the year before that and the year before that, the 50th will be over, and we will look around and say, what did we do?
Mr. Smith, you were recently made ambassador to Singapore. I travel a lot, Mr. Smith. I've been to over 100 countries. But do you know which passport is the most valuable passport in the world? The Singaporean passport. Because virtually every country in the world accepts the Singapore passport, meaning you don't need a visa. Singaporeans don't need a visa to go to almost any place in the world. All right? You know better than most that Singapore and the Bahamas started on the road to independence at the same time. You know where Singapore is. You know where we are. What is your view of using Singapore as a model to advance ourselves?
Let me first say I was named, it was publicized that I was named. But I am still waiting 4 or 5 months later to be able to go to Singapore as a non-resident ambassador. And why am I happy but to honor to do that? And by the way, it's a non-paying job. I don't want anybody to think I'm making, but they'll have to pay for my expenses, whatever those expenses would be. Let me tell you something that's not well known about Singapore. If you were to name the 3 countries in the world that has the highest level of literacy. No, let me correct. 4 countries, no, 3 countries and a destination. The 4 would be this: South Korea, Taiwan, that is formerly still a part of mainland China,
Singapore.
Hong Kong, 4 I said. Singapore is number 1. It was a dirt poor island off the coast of Malaysia. Today they have the best train, albeit not a very huge one, military service in the world, better than Israel. In order to get people to come there to train so that Malaysia and other countries don't pounce on them to say Singapore can be building an army, the Israelis who came to advise them initially a number of years ago had to disguise themselves as Mexicans coming in supposedly to do some construction. So the Israeli people found some brown-looking Israelis, people from Israel, to come to Singapore, but they came disguised as Mexican workers. And that is today technologically and in terms of efficiency. So that's an area where we can learn from the Singapore and how to guard our borders. And because of the relationship that the founder of Singapore had with Sir Lyndon Pinland, and I knew they had warm regard for each other, we could get to know some people there who could help us in the financial service area, in terms of the maintenance and the construction. They are going to perfect, because sand isn't available to them anymore. Sand for construction. Because where they used to get the sand from is either Malaysia or Indonesia, who says that we need the sand, because for construction purposes, the Bahamas is blessed that all sand works well. Sand on deserts don't work in construction. All I'm saying is this: there are so many areas we could benefit from. And there are so many areas we could benefit from other countries, but those are the countries we ought to concentrate on. Countries with whom we could share a relationship. And then we could say, look, you Singaporeans who work, and you want to bask in the sun, come to the Bahamas. We could also try to get, this is an idea that I think my my friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Aviation, will pursue. And it is something that I know the Prime Minister will probably raise with his colleagues when at the next CARICOM meeting. Looking at the Caribbean as a region and determining how we could attract people to the region and then do feeder service away. I think the Bahamas is ideally suited
To be a hub?
to be a hub for airplanes like Singapore Air or from some of the Arab
Emirates,
countries.
yeah,
The
yeah,
Emirates
Emirates.
come to the Bahamas and then go off. And maybe we should use CARICOM to determine our relationship in terms of trade and all that. Do that out of Jamaica. Do something else out of one of the other Caribbean. Yeah. But for aviation purposes, the Bahamas is ideally suited. And we could do that, and probably New Providence. If not, Mayaguana can always, that long airstrip there. Mayaguana can become a transshipment center. The depth of the water at Mayaguana is such that the largest tankers in the world can go there, right offshore, right there. Almost throw your line over at Mayaguana. And smaller carriers take it through the Panama Canal and then go on bigger containers to shorten.
Going to the Pacific.
Yes. We could do that, and I think Jamaica is thinking about the same thing. We have got to look strategically at how we want the Bahamas to develop and don't wait for some foreign investor to come. Yes, determine how we want Mayaguana, how we want Exuma, how we want Dinao, how we want Auckland. Auckland people say they don't want too much of that. Long Island people got their views about this too. But listen to them and let us determine what we want to do with our country. And then say to the fellow, look, we want you here, but we want you here under these terms. And if you want all land, you got to come under these conditions. Take the leadership in how we want the Bahamas to be. And I think that approach will inspire young people to be supportive of it and not just pandering to young people because they're young, but let's pander to their dreams for a better life, better education, and a better country. And it doesn't matter where those ideas come from. When they hear about it, when they see the possible benefit, you could be 90 and telling them that, they'll say, yes, sir. But if you're telling them nonsense, just playing up to their youthfulness, they'll one day come and say, look, when you should have guided me, you didn't. You took advantage of me.
Mr. Smith, thank you very much, sir, for the words of wisdom. And you have embellished many issues for our people today. And I thank you very much for your time, sir.
It is always a joy, and let me tell you, I don't know how much longer I've got, but I know one thing. I don't want my children to say that during the time their father and their grandfather had, he didn't try to do his best. And we got to stop believing that we could write our legacy. Your legacy is what you do after you're gone. You could do very little about it because the word legacy suggests it has to end. That comes at the end. Yeah. And I'm not too eager to worry about things like that right now. I'm looking to tomorrow and a future that makes this country the finest country in the world. And I believe God will guide us and bless us in that endeavor.
Thank you, sir. And we bring our program to an end, Jones and Company, and good evening, everyone.